Welcome to Jai Balaya Academy. First of all, why is it named as Jai Balaya? Talking very frankly, I have been thinking about the YouTube channel name for past 2 weeks. Literally, ఒక్క పేరు కూడా నా తలకి తగలలేదు. Right now, I was hearing to Akhanda title track and the name popped off. So it's named Jai Balaya Academy. Don't worry about the name. And definitely don't see the group DP also. We are here to study one subject, that is programming for problem solving. The only reason why I'm starting this YouTube channel is to completely fill up this channel with this particular subject. The reason is very simple. Multiple students of mine are having doubts in this subject. Yes, it's absolutely understandable. You have no knowledge about programming, so it's a very new experience for you all. It's just like learning a new language in just a span of 4 months, which is practically hard. Like tomorrow, if a person comes to me and tells learn Punjabi in 4 months, ye le beta book, it's not possible for me to learn. In the same way, I know you people are having the doubts. So to repeat what I have said in the class and to have a record, like if in case you have a doubt in particular topic, instead of approaching me, you can just come to this YouTube channel and find the topic and understand. All right. So this subject I'm following is all 21 syllabus provided by VBIT. Definitely this is a VBIT course. As few people know, this is a PPS course. So if you have supplements, if you have, it's a core subject, like you are in first year, that's fine. If you are in first sem, it's fine. If you have supplements, it's fine. Everything will be covered here. So you can come here, get your doubts, understand the topic, learn and leave. Fine. I don't want any likes. I don't want any shares. Please make sure you don't share this YouTube with everyone. Okay, it's private. I have created this particularly for CS, MA and B section because those are my students and my teaching will be favorable to them. If in case you are other students, it's absolutely fine, but please don't get confused with the examples that I am using and maybe your faculty using. Okay, my examples may be strange, the way how I teach may be completely different. Please don't expect the way how I teach for the other faculties to teach, or if in case you have a super cool faculty and I am pretty much bad compared to them, please don't whatever it is, please don't defame me also. Okay, it's just for my students to understand. I'm just doing this. Okay, so talking in cool, the first unit that I'll be teaching right now is Introduction to C Programming. In this unit we'll be knowing the basic terms, technologies, the operators, whatever it is we are using in C programming. And I'll be very clear, if in case you don't understand the first unit, the complete flow of this book is gonna fail. That's because programming is just like a train. If we consider this as an engine and this as its compartments, if you don't understand one compartment, like if you lose one, the rest of the train is gone. One connection is gone, the train is gone. So you have to understand every single topic that's been taught and you need to analyze. And the second important thing, please remember that this is not just a programming, this is known as a language. And in languages, you are not supposed to bahat anything. Like see, the way how I'm talking right now, it's not bahated. It's coming with a flow because I have a grip in English language. In the same way, when it comes to programming, make sure you don't bahat any code that's given by a faculty. Instead, try to understand what's written over there. And second thing, the only reason why I'm using English in this video instead of Telugu is I am not sure like if this video gets into some higher authorities, maybe like principals or vice principals or directors or whomever it is. So I don't want me to spell out some words that may be irrelevant or it may look odd. So when I'm talking in English, I make sure that I use my professionalism over here. So that's the reason I'm using English. And if in case you are from Telugu medium students, you can't follow English and you're having some doubts, feel free to approach me. I am available in the staff room. So you can come there and get your doubts sorted up. Okay. And the second thing is my iPad, which was supposed to come today, it didn't arrive today. So that's the reason I'm using pen and paper. Most probably for first 2-3 videos, I'll be using pen and paper method. Once I get my iPad, I am supposed to get it by Sunday. Then I will use the iPad screen to just teach. Okay, for now, please understand. Because the more I wait to upload the video, the more syllabus it gets. So it's stacking up. So I don't want to wait anymore. So I'm directly pushing it up. Okay. Now talking about the syllabus, you have 3 parts in your syllabus. Okay. Just give me a second. Yeah, sorry about that. So talking about the syllabus, in unit 1, I have split the unit 1 into 3 parts. Part A, part B, part C. So please take it down. If in case you have time, just take it down, or if you have the syllabus copy, just keep it up. Just skip the video to next 2 minutes. So talking about it, in part A, we'll be talking about computer systems. In computer systems, the first part I'll be covering is basics of computer systems, the type of computing environments that's available. Next, it will be computer languages, creating and running the programs, program development, flowchart, algorithm, and pseudocode. If in case you feel the video is bit fast, please put it into minus 0.75 or minus 25x, whichever you are favorable. YouTube provides with it so that my speed reduces. And if in case you feel the video is slow, push it up into forward. You can increase the speed so that it sets it up. Okay, it's not a classroom. You have the feature in YouTube, so please use it. And the second part is called as overview of C language. Here we'll be talking about the basic background, which is not that important. We'll be talking about C program structure, most important topic. And the third one is C tokens. In this is also a very important topic: identifiers, keywords, constants, symbols. Then we'll be talking about the data types, variables, and input output operations, functions. All right. And the third part is known as operators. Here we'll be talking about the most of the operators that's available in C programming languages: arithmetic, relational, logical, bitwise, conditional, increment, decrement, assignment operators, etc. There are multiple of them. Then I'll be explaining some of the expressions. We'll see how the expressions gets evaluated, type conversions, and lot more. So in simple, the first unit is the heart of your subject. In simple, if in case you don't understand the first unit, every single unit is gonna break. So make sure you understand every single thing that's written in these notes. Alright, I'll be going very slow. I'll be going crystal clear. If in case you have doubts, you get stuck, rewind the video and go back. But please, if in case you don't understand one single part, don't jump into next part. Because as I told, it's a train. One thing breaks, the train dies. Right? So I don't want to waste more time. So let's get started. Let's go with the very simple terms. Let's go from the base, thinking that you people are from LKG or first standard. Let's start from there. So first I would like to define what is a computer. Lot of you people tell that, sir, computer is a machine. Guys, you people are in degree level right now, engineering level. So use some professional words. Computer is an electronic device. Computer is an electronic device that is used to perform some computations. Just use this statement. Don't forget the word computations as well as electronic device. These two words should be there in your answer. Alright? Don't be like Ranchor Das Chanchad from 3 Idiots. Sir, anything that reduces human work. No, if you want some answers, be like Chatur Ramalingam and have a specific definition. The simplest definition that can be given for computer from my side is, it is an electronic device that is used to perform some computations. That's it. Okay? And the computer system, the entire computer system, the computer that you see in lab, which is called as computer system. CM stands for computer. I'm lazy in writing words. Okay? That can be split into 2 parts, 2 major components. And if you guess it right, if you have not slept in my class, you will be knowing one is hardware, the second one is software. Okay? Now, sorry about that. There is a guy near my room who wants to show off his bullet, which is literally not that great. Sorry about that sound. Let's continue. So, computer system can be broadly classified into 2 parts. One is called as the hardware. HW stands for hardware. And the other one is called as the software. So what is hardware? In simple, hardware are the hardware components of your computer that you can touch and feel. For example, it may be CPU, it may be monitor, right? It may be your display. These are all hardware components that you can literally touch and feel. But the second one is called as, this is the body of the computer. You can call hardware as the body. Like a human body, you can touch and feel. You can touch and feel your skin, you can touch and feel your hand, fingers and all. This is hardware part of us. The part that is not visible to the eyes, but is a connecting part to every single hardware component, is the software. Software is a system it's the programs that helps us to connect multiple hardware components. Maybe your display, maybe your CPU, maybe your keyboard, maybe your whatever it is. Everything that you use gives you an interface provided by operating system, right? Operating system provides you an interface between the hardware and yourself as a user. So operating system is a software that you cannot touch and feel, but it's still there. It's a set of programs. And for human body, I would like to say soul. the human body's soul, which you cannot see, is known as the software for us. Okay, we run as a software and our CPU is a brain. Human brain is the CPU for us and soul is the operating system. In the same way, for the computer, hardware devices are input output devices, whereas system software can be classified into two broad categories. We'll see it in the next session. Okay, for now, soul and hardware components. If this is clear, we'll go to the next topic. Just give me a second. So now let's talk about in depth of computer components that you saw. Hardware and software will be talking in depth. Okay, so computer system, I am not sure why I am writing everything. Just make sure it's computer system. Okay, the first thing a computer system has is called as input devices. Input devices. And if I have to give examples for it, it may be keyboard, it may be mouse, it may be a scanner, it may be a camera, right? These are all input devices by which you give input to the computer, right? This will be connected to something called as processing unit, or known as CPU. This stands as CPU, central processing unit, where all the operations are performed. And before CPU can start executing, it should load the program. Like, see, if I have to give an example, your computer may be having something called as VLC player. It may be having something called as Chrome, Firefox, or whatever it is, right? These softwares are installed in your secondary storage. Secondary storage is nothing but your hard drive. It may be your pen drive, it may be your hard drive, it may be a CD player, it may be a floppy disk. These are all secondary storages, okay? But the moment you start this application, it gets loaded into your primary memory. That's called as primary memory. Forget my handwriting, it's primary memory. That's called as RAM, random access memory. So in this diagram, you have to write primary storage here. This is primary storage. Primary storage, PS stands for primary storage, that is RAM, okay? The first part of the computing device is CPU as well as primary storage, which is further connected. Like, once you give the input, you should expect some output, right? For that, we use something called as output devices. Output devices, and examples for output devices are n number of them, but the most important one that we use is either its monitor, the display, or the second one is the printer, right? Printer, monitor, projector, not joystick. Joystick is an input device. I am not sure. I cannot remember the devices right now. Fine. For now, in output devices, we expect something out from the computer, and in input devices, we give input to the computer. So now you'll be asking, sir, why are you telling all these things? These are for LKG, UKG students. No. In C programming, we are very much focused on this, because in input devices, using the keyboard, we will give input to our programs. And in output devices, like in monitor, we will see what is the output our computer is giving. Okay. So here, from now on, don't be a common man. You are no more a common man. You are a developer right now. You are here to develop the programs so that you can perform. Like in your mobile phone, there's something called a simple calculator app, right? But after attending 2 to 3 classes, you will be able to write a program to make a simple calculator. That is how fast you are gonna learn in this subject. Okay. So from now on, you will be playing with input devices. You'll be expecting the output in output devices, and your computer will do for it. And the second thing, this is primary storage, right? Computer and primary storage. As I told, we have secondary storage as well. So secondary storage comprises of your disk. It may be hard disk. Okay, your laptop will be having 512 GB hard disk, 1 terabyte of hard disk, 1 TB of hard disk. Your mobile phone will be having 36 GB of internal storage, 64 GB of internal storage, where all your files are stored. That particular disk is called as secondary storage. Okay, that's it. So these are the basic components of computer system in simple. Input devices, processing units, RAM, secondary storage, and output devices. If this much is clear, we'll go to the next topic. See, these topics are not that important. Okay, these topics are not that important, but most of you people may not be knowing about this. Without knowing this, you cannot go forward. So I'm taking this course a bit slow. If in case you feel like, sir, idella namak even nimak munde telsu, just skip it. It's not a class. Just press forward button, skip. Done. Next topic. Before that, as I told, this is a part of hardware. Okay, in this diagram, now we are done with hardware part. This part is complete. Now we have to go with software part. So now let's see the software part. So this is how the software part looks like. Don't worry about the boxes. Don't worry about my handwriting, stupid handwriting. I'll explain each and every word. Okay. The first box stands for software. That is what we are looking for, right? Software. And software can be broadly classified into 2 categories. One is called as system software, SYSTEM, SOFTWRE, system software, and the second one is called as application software. Okay, these are the two vast divisions of software. And coming to system software consists of some programs that is used to manage the hardware resources of the computer. Okay, this acts as the soul. This part acts as the soul for the hardware components. Like human body has kidney, liver, heart, eyes, ears, nose, brain, whatever it is, all are separate parts. We are connected by the soul. Like once the soul leaves the body, we are dead. In the same way, if the hardware components doesn't have a system software, computer cannot perform. For example, if you buy a monitor, display, keyboard, mouse, fix the cables, and it doesn't have a system software, you cannot operate the computer. It's a dead body. In the same way, system software, I call it as the soul of the computer. It's the soul of the computer. Is it clear? And system software can be broadly classified into three categories. Not three categories, three parts. The first one is operating system. So what is an operating system? In simple, operating system is an interface. It's an interface. IF stands for interface between the hardware components. Definitely hardware components, that is printer, monitor, display, whatever it is, CPU. One is it acts as an interface between the hardware devices. And who uses these hardware devices? It's we, the users. Okay, so the simplest definition what my sir taught me in my BTech, his name is Madesh sir, I still remember him. The definition given by Madesh sir was, and it's really acceptable to me, it is the operating system acts as an interface between the hardware and the user. This is as simple as that. And examples for hardware devices is the phone that you're using. Android has Android operating system. Our laptops have Windows operating system. Our labs have Linux operating systems. So these are the operating systems, okay, that acts just as an interface between hardware and user. Done. And the second one that we call is system support. See, the moment you install operating systems, we get some extra features as well. Let me show here. Just see my screen here, right? You can just go here, my PC, and can you see here this drives, A, C drive, D drive, E drive, whatever it is. These are the extra features available, right? With this I can partition the disk. With this I can partition my disk. See, there are a lot of files here. I can partition the disk. That one's hardware part that I have here, like this. This is my 1 TB of hard disk, which is now sub-partitioned, right? It's got sub-partitioned. How? We have a software called as disk management. If you can see this, this is the software. Okay, this is the software. This is called as disk management. So these are extra utilities, extra softwares that are provided by the operating system. Okay, these are called as system support. These are the extra utilities that is available for you to make your job simple. Okay, there are n number of softwares, but the best one that I can suggest is disk manager, by which I can partition my disk. Okay, in the same way you can also perform this task. So in simple, system support is extra utilities that's available. I'm having the PDF here, not because I don't know the topic. I don't want to skip any topic, okay? So if in case you want the definition for system support software, you can take it down. System support software provides system utilities and other operating services. That's it. In simple, okay? And the third part is system development. See, if you are a software engineer, like you people are from CSM, A and B section, there may be a number of students. Please don't take it in heart that sir is saying A section, B section. Are we not humans? I'm sorry. CSM A section because computer science, machine learning and artificial intelligence. These people have opted for it. If you are from CSB or CSC or CSD, CSD, whatever, FG, whatever it is, every one of you are right now my developers. Okay, just think that you are a developer. So the first thing a developer needs to develop something is an editor, right? An editor. We use Genie in our lab, if you know that. So this is a system development software where you write your code. The next thing what happens is compiler, right? Compiler compiles it and translates it into machine language binaries, and then computer understands it. Then CPU understands what we are trying to say, right? Executor, then it replies us, does it. So this part is called as system development, the phase where you develop a system software. This acts in simple. System development software includes some language translators. Definitely we need some translators that translates our language into the machine language. This is the first part. And it also helps us execute our programs. Like in the lab, if you have written Hello World program, the most simple program, right? Hello World /n in printf. So this program was executed using GCC command, or if in Genie you just pressed compile, build, and execute, right? So this part was done by system development software. For us, it's Genie. And the second thing, if in case you got some errors, like semicolon is missing, you wrote instead of hash input, you wrote studio.h, right? You do these silly mistakes. Don't tell you didn't do. I saw 90% of my students doing this mistake. So you got some errors, right? You got some errors. And then you debugged those errors. This phase is called as debugging, removing the errors. This is also provided by system development software. So at the end of the day, the main motive of system development software is to provide you an interface for developing, running, testing, and debugging your software and create an error-free program. That's it. So this part is now complete. We just traced out this part. We have an operating system which acts as an interface. We have system support softwares which help you use your PC or devices in a better manner. We have system development software which helps us develop the operating system, right? This is the first part. Now let's come to application software, the place where apps are there. Like see, if in case you open your operating system, we'll be having something called as Chrome, right? We'll be having something called as Firefox. Are they system softwares? No. These are the applications that help you access much more. Like using Firefox and Chrome, you can access the internet, right? These are called as application softwares. So in phones, you have WhatsApp, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Instagram. These are not needed for the computer. These are needed for us. These are applications created for the welfare of the users. Okay, such softwares are called as application softwares that make welfare to our life. Welfare, WELFARE. ఇంకా తెలుగులో ఏమంటారు నాకు తెలీదు. ఐఎమ్ నాట్ ఫ్రమ్ ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్, సో ఐ డోంట్ నో తెలుగు మచ్. Welfare. Okay, done. There are two types of application softwares. The first one is general purpose software. Okay, in case of general purpose software, all the users are treated as same and the same application is developed. Example for this is WhatsApp. See, if in the WhatsApp in my phone, the WhatsApp in your phone doesn't change. It's like Pawan Sarka WhatsApp. I'll give him an extra feature. He can use YouTube in this WhatsApp. Directly YouTube interface. And in your software, this is Pawan Sir student software. I'll give him an extra feature where he can directly go to any website and download the browsers using WhatsApp. No, it's not possible. WhatsApp looks similar for all. This is called as general purpose applications. Generally developed for everyone. In simple, the WhatsApp's general purpose is texting. It's a messaging app. That's it. Such softwares that are created with a basic motive for everyone with the same design is called as general purpose application. So what is specific purpose application? Specific application. These are the applications created with the motive for specific type of people. See, to give an example, for our college, we have something called as ECAP. We have something called as ECAP software, where all the employee IDs, your attendance, your parents' numbers, everything is registered online, right? This application, the ECAP ID that we have, it doesn't work in other colleges. It's a personal application. It's a personal software. So that's the difference between general purpose and application specific. I believe this much is very clear. I'm not sure which example to give for specific software because it's not that I'm not that familiar with the names. But for general purpose, I can give n number of application name: Firefox, Google Chrome, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Google Drive, Gmail, email, whatever it is. But for this, I'm sorry, I don't have much examples for it. Okay, because I'm not that rich to afford one application specific software. You need to pay money for it, right? This much is clear. Now, I believe this much is clear. So the last topic, because my phone has only 10% charge. So the last topic for this video is what is the action? Always saw that hardware and software, how do they communicate? See, the basic component of a computer is hardware. That is input devices, output devices, whatever it is. This is just a dead body. So what fills the life in the dead body, as I told? Yes, it's the system software. So the next level is system software. You have to circle it like this. See, the hardware gets life from system software. And using the system software, if you have to use the internet, what we use? Definitely, yes, we use application software. So the next level is application software. Please forgive me for my ugly handwriting. And the last one, who uses this application software? Yes, again, right, user. If you have attended my classes, definitely you will be knowing this diagram. So see this, you have to trace it from inside to out. So we have hardware, that may be a monitor, CPU, whatever it is. It gets life from the system software, and then system software provides us with extra softwares like Internet Explorers, movie players, VLC, that is called as application softwares. And these application softwares are used by user. So when the user performs a task, uses application software that requests the system software using the hardware devices, we get it. For example, let's play a movie through VLC. So user pressed a movie using VLC, VLC got executed using system software, and the hardware it got access is display and speakers, right? This is the structure. This is the relationship between system and application software and the hardware. Hardware, system software and application software, and we users. So if this much is clear, we are mostly done with computer systems. There's one more simple topic that is called as computing environments. Therefore, there are 4 types of computing environments. I'm not clear if it's there in your syllabus or not. I'll cover it for you. Okay. I'll merge these 2 videos. Don't worry. I'll merge these 2 videos and I'll upload it in the same manner. Okay. Don't worry. Everything will be done. Part A will be put in single video. Okay. Let's continue. Okay. Let's continue. The next topic is called as computing environments. Okay. Forget my handwriting, forget my spelling, listen to what I'm saying. That's enough. So the next topic is, one second, focus ra. Computing environments. Based on the sharing of resources between the users. Based on the sharing of computer resources between the users, computer environments are broadly classified into 4 types. So first of all, what is resources? Resources can be anything. It can be your processor, it can be your complete CPU, it can be your input devices, it can be your output devices. So all the hardware components that you see are termed as resources. So it can be shared among the users. So based on the type of sharing, computing environment is broadly classified into 4 types. Okay, this much is clear, I guess. So the first type is called as personal computer, PC. In case of personal computer, all the resources are dedicated to one person. Like if in case you have a computer in your home or you have the computer in our labs, so one computer is used by one person at a time. So all the resources available in the computer is completely given to one user. Okay, it can be your laptop, it can be your home computer, PCs. So all these things are called as personal computers, where all the resources are shared to one single user at one particular point of time. I believe this type of computing environment is clear. And the second one is called as time sharing environment. I have cough. Okay, so if in case my voice changes, it breaks and video gets suddenly cut and it resumes, it means that I was coughing, so I paused the video. Okay, don't think that video got lagged. Video will restart from there itself. You may feel 1 second of clip edit. Okay, don't worry. So time sharing environment. So what happens in time sharing environment is there may be multiple users. Let's say user 1, user 2. All right, user 1 and user 2. Let's assume they have a display, a keyboard. Okay, but they may be having only one resource. So this resource is computed to this computer. This resource is also connected to this computer. It's just an example. The diagrams may vary based on who is drawing it. My example. And these people are connected to this resource. So in case of time sharing environment, they will be given a set of time limit. Let's say he has 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Okay, and he has from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. In this particular point of time, at 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., all the resources are given to user number 1. At user number 1 will get access to all the computing resources and he will perform his task. And when the clock hits 2 p.m., this person will stop executing, he will become idle, and this person will start executing. You are getting this? In simple, in your class, if I give you a Dairy Milk Silk chocolate, and I say share it, so one person will take one piece of chocolate, whereas other person has to wait till he gets the chocolate. When second person gets the chocolate, he will break his part and pass it to the third person. So this is called as time sharing, where when the resource is in your hand, you can use it, where the other users will wait. This is second type, time sharing environment, and first one is personal computer. Okay. Okay, let's draw it here. And the third type is called as distributed environment. In case of distributed environment, what happens is a resource, let's consider this as a resource. It will be split. It will be split or it will be shared among multiple users. User 1 and user 2. In simple, if you have a 4 GB of RAM, 2 GB will be given to this person, 2 GB will be given to this person. Resource, computer resource. So what happens is, in case of time sharing, as you can see in time sharing, one person was waiting when the other person was executing, but here it's parallel executions. It's parallel execution. That is, both are executing at the same time. That's the only difference. But here the resource got shared between the users. Is it clear? It got shared between the users. If I have to give example for it, if in case you have gone to Mandi restaurant, a big Bakasura plate will be there. Here biryani will be given. Okay, in single plate. Like Kanjus, one plate biryani. 4 people will be eating at the same point of time. If you call this biryani as a resource, it is getting shared among the people at the same point of time. Okay, this environment is called as distributed computing environment. And the last one is called as client server. Client server. Forget my spellings. CLIENT dash server. 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 Okay, client server environment. In case of client server environment, what happens is, you are the client. You are the client. Client is our customer. Okay, customer will be having a simple computer. Let's assume a simple computer. All right, he cannot perform a task that is given to him. Like, he may be needing 8 GB of RAM to perform his task, whereas his computer has only 4 GB of RAM. Practically, it's not possible to execute the program. Instead of it, he requests an online server, online, ONLINE, SERVE, online server, a big computer that's available in the server to execute his program. So he uploads his program here, uploads it in using the internet protocols. The server will execute the program for him and give him the output back. Output back. This is server. This model is called as client server model, where the client requests a task that will be executed by a server in internet using internet facilities, and then the output will be returned to him. The best example for client server model is how I can put it. Like, I'm unable to think of a real world example. Yeah, bus. Let's think of a bus. Alright, let's think of a bus. ఎలా ఉంటుంది బస్? ఇలా ఉంటుందని పెట్టుకుందాంలే. ఓకే, టైర్లు ఫర్ కంఫర్ట్. యు ఆర్ ద క్లయింట్. ఓకే, యూ వాంట్ టు ట్రావెల్ ఫ్రమ్ హైదరాబాద్ టు విజయవాడ. I don't know spelling of places. Vijayawada. Okay, so will you go and sit in the bus? You will drive the bus, take it to Vijayawada? No, you will just simply book a ticket. Let's say you booked a ticket in VRL Travels, right? This is the server. You will just board the bus. They will have their own driver to drive you and take you to Vijayawada. At the end of the day, your task is to reach Vijayawada. That's it. How you reached, what happened there, it's none of your business. Who drove? Did he take left turn? Did he take right turn? Nothing. At the end of the day, you reached Vijayawada, final destination. In the same way, you loaded your computer program here, you put it into the server, he ran the computer program, he gave you the output. That's it. At the end of the day, client requests for a task, server provides it using internet facility. So these are the 4 types of computing environments. The first one is personal computer, the second one is time sharing, and the third one is distributed, and the fourth one is client server model. Okay, so these are the 4 computing environments. I believe you people are clear about this. Okay, let's go to next topic. So the next topic is machine languages. Machine languages. What do you understand seeing this? Here we'll be talking about the various languages that a machine can understand. Okay, in simple, machine languages is the languages that a machine can understand. If I have to talk about human languages, what are the various languages humans can understand? It may be Telugu, it may be Hindi, it may be Kannada, it may be Tamil, Malayalam, Gujarati, Punjabi, Assami, Bengali, whatever it is, right? Humans can understand these languages. In the same way, computer can understand 3 types of languages. Based on the complexity of writing the program, the programming languages are divided into 3 types. The first type is called as low-level language. Low-level language. Forget my handwriting. The second one is symbolic language. The second one, I'm holding the phone in my hand, so it may shake. The second one is symbolic language. ఐఎమ్ సారీ, బయట ఎవరో మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. అండ్ ద థర్డ్ వన్ ఈస్ హై లెవెల్ లాంగ్వేజ్. High level language, right? So what are this? I'll talk one by one. In low level language, let's start with low level language. See, the only language computer can understand is binary, zeros and ones. Okay, computer can understand zeros and ones, whereas we can understand English in simple, right? So computer literally cannot understand English. If we talk to a computer, hey computer, hi computer, perform an operation between the two alphabets A and B, that is two numbers 2 and 5, and give me the answer 7. You can't tell it like that. You have to tell it in machine language, that is binary. And we cannot talk in binary because zeros and ones is very very confusing and very very difficult to remember. So if in case a developer writes a program directly in computer language by default, that is binaries, ఇలా ప్రోగ్రామ్ రాసి దీన్ని రన్ చేస్తే, this language where you directly write the computer language, such level of languages is known as low level languages, where you directly write in machine language. But the problem here is it's very very complex to write such programs. Is it possible for you to remember all the sequences of binary numbers to get executed? It's practically hard. This languages was I believe it was started in 1940s, somewhere in 1940s, but it was soon detected that it's very hard to do it. When initial computers came, this was the language they were using, but it's really practically hard, where you directly write in machine language. So the next evolution that happened was called as symbolic languages. These are all not important topics, it is just to give you an overview, okay? Symbolic languages. In case of symbolic languages, right now these are popular known as assembly level languages. Microprocessors use this language, assembly level. Here we use some set of instructions as symbols. For example, addition, here it used to be binary, right? Here you write it, example, it's not correct, just an example. You just write add. So the moment this symbol is detected, it understands that add. Then you may give two register names, R1 and R2. So what does this mean? Add register R1 and R2. This is how symbolic languages work, where you have set of symbols, predefined symbols that you need to use to write the programming language. Can computer understand this add? Can computer understand this add by default? No. This instruction should be converted into binary. Whatever it is, it's not the correct sequence, right? So in between, we need a translator. Translator. So what is a translator? Like assume I know English, you know only Telugu. We want to talk with each other. I know English, you know Telugu. We want to talk with each other. I'll be like, hey maga, hey dude, what's up? And you will be like, em cheptunnavra naina. You are understanding the situation. Instead of that, we will get one person, a translator who knows both English and Telugu. I will speak to him in English. He will translate it to you in Telugu. You will reply in Telugu. He will get me in English. This is the job of a translator. So here we will have a translator to transfer the symbols into binary language, that is machine level language, and once the output has been received, it will be transferred back to human languages. I believe symbolic language and low level languages are clear, right? Mid level languages are symbolic languages. And third one is high level languages. And the third type of language is high level languages, okay? High level languages. Why high level languages? See, you may think that in symbolic languages now we could have used English, now we are getting an opportunity to use English. So why high level languages were required? It would have been very satisfied with symbolic languages, right? The problem is, in symbolic languages there are set of instructions that can be used in a particular syntactical format, like add R1 comma R2. In the same way you should write this. There are n number of instructions, okay? It reduced the task of the developer. Yes, from binary we got situated into English, that is natural languages, but it had some set of restrictions which I don't want to discuss in detail because it is not that important to you. In high level languages, it is a one level upgrade of symbolic languages, where the use of natural language became even more familiar. We could use high level language like normal English to write our programs in a desire how we want to write, and then it used to get translated into machine language. The one thing that we share in common with symbolic languages and machine level languages is the translator. Okay, where we write the program in natural language, that is our language, and then it computes into computer language or machine language. This is clear. In high level languages, we use even more familiar, even more simpler language to write our programs. And talking widely in high level languages, the first language that came in high level was Fortran, Fortran, known as formula translation. The full form is formula translation. It was created by John and IBM team in 1957. Really not needed, just to tell you. And the second thing I believe it came was, yes, it's COBOL. COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language. Okay, and C is a high level language used for both system software and new application softwares. The problem is some people claim C as mid level language, whereas some people claim it as high level language. Even I don't have clarity, but according to me, according to my heart, I call C as high level language. Okay, for me, high level language, please cross check in internet what it is, but for me, C is high level language. Some people call it as mid level language as well. So I don't have clarity on this line if C is a high level or mid level. For my heart, it's always high level language. I believe you people are clear with machine level languages. The first high level machine level language was Fortran, next came COBOL, and now it's C. Okay, let's continue. Yes, this is an important topic. Okay, there may be a question on this, I may not guarantee, but yes, this for my heart feels important. Okay, creating and running programs, that is the steps involved in writing a program and running the program, both in foreground as well as in background. Okay, let's start. The first person who writes the program is definitely a programmer, a software developer, software engineer, you people. Okay, you are a programmer. You will have to type your program. Tuck, 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 tuck. If you have gone to the lab, we use something called as Genie, right? What is Genie? Yes, it is a text editor. So a programmer writes his code in text editor, right? And in which language does he write his program? Is it machine level language or normal English? Yes, it's normal English. Okay, he writes his program something like this: hash include main that this, right? This is called as source file. Source file is the place or the file that contains the code. And what is the extension for C programming? I believe you people are answering, it's .c. Okay, don't forget. So once source code is done, what is the next step you do? Yes, you try to execute it, right? We'll go for compilation. The second step is, this much is clear, a programmer writes his program in a text editor and that file is called as source file. And the next one is compiler. Compiler. So task of the compiler is to convert, first of all, is to convert the high level language into low level language. That is, this was written in high level language, now it will be zeros and ones. The program will be get converted into zeros and ones, and this is called as object file. This file is called as object file, and the first task of the compiler is pre-processing. That is, all the header files that you wrote, maybe hash include stdio.h, whatever it is, those things will be replaced with the code written for them. That task is known as pre-processing. Expanding your code. It will expand your code. Okay, your header file hash include stdio.h, the meaning will be replaced over there. Your file won't be the same 4 lines ka file. It would have become 4000 lines ka file now. After pre-processing, it will convert the file into binary. That file is known as object file. The task doesn't end here. That object file will be given as input to a linker, linker. Okay, there may be some things that compiler couldn't pre-process. Maybe you have written some inbuilt functions that were not found here. What linker does is, it will chuck in its library. There will be a small library of linker. It's not small, it's very huge. Okay, this is a library where linker will chuck the unabbreviated things, the things that it couldn't extend, that compiler in the first phase couldn't do it. So linker will check if there is something in library that holds the meaning of that particular extension. For example, okay, it's not true. For example, there may be a function called as Pawan. You have written something called as Pawan, inbuilt function. So it will find in the library is something Pawan explained here there. If the meaning of Pawan is expanded here, then it will further expand the file. So tell me, if this is the object file and this is the expanded file, is it smaller or larger than this? Yes, it's definitely larger. Okay, so draw it in a bigger manner and again put zeros and ones. This is how it should look. It should not be the same size. This also matters. Your diagrammatic representation matters. Object file is smaller than this file, and this file is called as executable file. Executable file. So the task of the compiler is first pre-process, expand the file, then translate it. Okay, translate it to binary, and then give it as a feedback to the linker. Linker will check in the library if there is something that went unexpanded, and then it further expands. If in case an error occurs here, it will get terminated here. It won't create the executable file. Instead, it will pop an error to the programmer. If there is no errors, only then we get the executable file, and in Linux it is a.out. You can check in your lab. There is something called as a.out file created for every program that you compile using GCC, not Genie directly, but GCC command. I don't want to explain GCC command to confuse your brain right now, but yes, we get an executable file for every C program that you write. Okay, and then that particular file will be given input to a runner, that is executor. You press F8, F9 and F5, right? That F5 is called as runner, and then it will display us the results. So now tell me, results, is it in binary or is it in human language? Yes, it will be in our language. Okay, it's not binary anymore. It will be like enter two numbers allowed only, and that file is called as results. So this is how you create and run the program. I'll repeat. The first thing is programmer writes a program using text editor. For us it's Genie, Geany, and then we get our source file. This file is called as source file. That source file will be compiled using a compiler. Compiler will first pre-process it, expand the header files and do whatever it's required, and then translate it into binary file, that is machine level language. That object file, that file will be called as object file. That will be given input to the linker, the unexpanded files, expanded functions. The compiler, the linker will try if there is something specified in the library, and if in case yes it's there, then it will further expand the file like this. Arrow marks goes like this, and if we don't have any errors in our function, we get our executable file, and once we get our executable file, we give it as an input to the runner and we get our results. So in Genie, first you press F8 to compile, F9 to build, and F5 to run. Okay, and if you're using stylish terminal, alt control T, then the command is gcc filename.c for compilation and /a.out for execution. These are the two ways of executing C program in our Linux operating system. So I believe this part is clear. I'm just slowing it down for you to copy. You can pause the video and copy. Okay, that's it. And the last topic of part A. Okay, the last topic of part A and the last topic of our video is program development, like how we develop a program and how we represent it in paper. First, let's understand what is program development, and then I'll tell you the three different ways. I'm sorry, as I told, I have cup, my nose got blocked, so voice went. 1 second. Okay, now it's fine. So first one, for the steps of program development, the first one is, let's assume you are a developer. Okay, you are a developer, programmer, and you have a client who has come to you. He's explaining, సార్ నాకు అది కావాలి, సార్ నాకు ఇది కావాలి, నా గూగుల్లో ఒక ఇంటర్ఫేస్ కావాలి, నాకు వాట్సాప్లో ఒక యాప్ కావాలి. ఈస్ గివింగ్ యూ ద రిక్వైర్మెంట్స్, ఈస్ గివింగ్ యూ a problem statement. So first thing, as a developer, the thing you need to do is understand the problem. Understand the problem. To make your life simple, is asking you to create a application that can add two numbers. That's it. So understand the problem. What is the problem? He wants you to develop some program that will add two numbers. Second one, develop a solution. Here you understand the problem and try to come up with some logic, like how I can implement it. Its simple logic is, for addition of two numbers, he will give me A and B. I just have to add it. This is how you develop a solution. Third one, once you done with the developing part, then test the program. Develop it, write the code, and test. Test, give the inputs 2 and 3. Is your answer getting 5? If you are getting 5, yes, it's correct. If you are getting 7, you have done something wrong. Okay, you need to understand this. And finally, write the program. Write the program and do it. Okay, so 4 important steps. First, understand the problem, develop a solution in the paper, then test your solution, and then convert it into the program. These are the 4 parts involved in program development. Okay, now I'll show you 3 different ways in which you can develop your solution or you can represent it in the paper. Okay, the first method is called as algorithm. The second method is called as pseudocode. Seudocod. Yeah, I believe this is the correct answer. I'm really bad at spellings. Pseudocod. And the third one is flowchart. Okay, these are the 3 ways of putting your idea in pen and paper. This thing is very, very important. Why? I'll give an example. See, you will have seen multiple civil engineers, right? Civil engineers, before they start building the house, what is the first thing they do? They create a blueprint like this. They will tell, sir, ఇది మీ 30-40 సైట్, ఇక్కడ మీ బాత్రూమ్ వస్తుంది, ఇక్కడ మీ బెడ్రూమ్ వస్తుంది, ఇక్కడ మీ హాల్ వస్తుంది, ఇక్కడ మీ కిచెన్ వస్తుంది. He will show you like this, right? Definitely, this is the blueprint. Based on this only, they will start building the house. In the same way, as a developer, before writing any complex program, you should have a plan. Like, what is the next step? What is the next step? If I fail here, what should be my next move? If I pass here, what should be my next move? You will also have to make a plan like this. And to make that plan, you are given with 3 options. Either you write an algorithm, you write a pseudocode, or you write a flowchart. So now, let's understand them one by one. Okay, the last part of your part 1. Okay, the last part is aipote. We are done with part A of your unit 1. That is pseudocode, algorithm, and flowchart. Okay, now let's discuss one by one in detail. First one is pseudocode. What is a pseudocode? Pseudocode is the informal representation of your solution. It's informal representation. There is no given syntax, there is no given structure. It's just informal. You will use your normal English to solve it. See, there is no strict programming syntax to be followed here. It's just informal way. For example, if you have to write a pseudocode for adding 2 numbers, you can write it like this. Step 1, input 2 numbers. Step 2, add numbers. Step 3, print the sum. It's just informal. See, there is no fixed syntax. There is nothing. This is called as pseudocode. It's completely informal way of writing your solution in simple English. Okay, you don't use operators here, you don't use symbols here, you don't use variables here. ఏదో ఒకటి అనిపించింది రాసేసా, దట్స్ ఇట్. పిచ్చి గీతలు అంటారు కదా, అలా. Pseudocode is like that. But please make sure you understand the difference between pseudocode and algorithm. Okay, pseudocode is completely informal, whereas algorithm is a formal way of representing your idea. It's a formal way of representing your idea. It combines both English letters, English sentences like this, as well as some mathematical operators, comparison operators, bitwise operators. You can use it. In simple, algorithm is the step-by-step representation of the solution of a program. Step-by-step representation of solution of the program. Okay? For that, ఇక్కడ స్పేస్ లేదు కాబట్టి రాయట్లేదు. Just write algorithm for adding 2 numbers. You have to write here step 1 like this. Step 1 is to enter 2 numbers a comma b. ఇది ఇక్కడ స్పేస్ లేదు కాబట్టి ఇక్కడ రాసా. It's all one line. Enter 2 numbers a comma b. Next, perform c is equal to a plus b. అంటే perform the addition c is equal to a plus b. See, ఇక్కడ ఏమీ లేదు, ఇక్కడ ఉంది. We are using arithmetic operator here. We are using both addition as well as assignment operators. Next, part C లో ఉంది. There you will learn more about the operators. For now, just write perform c is equal to a plus b. Print the value of c. Full రాయండి. I have no space. Print the value of c, end of the solution. See, it is a very formal way, very structural way. We are using the operators. This is the difference between algorithm and pseudocode. Pseudocode is completely informal. రాసినట్టు రాసుకు వెళ్ళిపోతారు. But here you have to follow a fixed syntax. Your answer should look professional, because in most of the IT companies that you will join, you will have to write the algorithm for the solution of your program. So you should be knowing this. Okay, That's the difference between pseudocode and algorithm. Don't get confused. Pseudocode lo it's completely informal, whereas algorithm is very very formal. There is a guy in my class, A section అనుకుంటా, ఒక algorithm రాశాడు, చాలా బాగా రాశాడు. I can't show it here. Just 1 second. Okay, not CSMA, it's CSMB section C. This is the algorithm for finding the greatest of 3 numbers. See how he has written. చాలా బాగా రాశాడు, అందుకే చూపిస్తున్నా. Focus avanaina, focus avu koncham focus. Yeah, see here, first one I'll read it. First one, ask user to input 3 variables, okay, 3 values. Read the 3 values in A, B, C. Check if A is greater than B. If true, then check if C is greater than, check A is greater than C. Confusion లేదు నాకు కూడా. If true, then print A is greater, else print C is greater. See how he has written, structure by structure. Next, if false, first condition, A is greater than B. If false, then check if B is greater than C. If true, print A is greater, else print C is greater. See, this is how you write the algorithm, and you have to write it in a very formal and structural manner. He has written it very beautifully. అందుకే చూపిస్తున్నా. Okay, this is an example. Internet కి వెళ్ళి examples for algorithms ante you will find n number of them. Okay, don't worry. And the third one is flowchart. It's diagrammatic representation where you use diagram to show the flow of your solution. అదేమని next slide లో చూపిస్తా. Now let's go for flowchart. And split it into 2 parts. This side write the symbol as the heading, okay, and here write meaning రాసుకోండి. ఇక్కడ నేను రాయను, I'll dictate this, okay. The first symbol is oval, 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 okay, oval, and the meaning is oval is used to represent start or end of the program. Either it's start of the program or end of the program. So how do you represent it? Start, oval, let's say draw oval and put start in the center, it represents start. Draw the oval and put end, it represents end of the program. This is the first symbol. The second symbol is parallelogram. It will look something like this. I'm very bad at drawing, I'm sorry, not an artist. It will be something like this. Parallelogram is used to represent either input or output operations. It's either input or output operations. In simple, if you want to input 2 variables A comma B, you have to draw it like this. Clear? If you want to output the value of A comma B, output AB, you have to draw it like this. This conveys your meaning. This is the second symbol. And third one, you want to solve some equations. Let's say C is equal to A plus B. You want to solve this equation. Such solutions are represented inside a rectangle. Rectangle is used to represent the calculation part, the operations part, okay, the calculations part, like C is equal to A plus B, C is equal to A minus B, A is equal to A plus B is equal to A minus B, whatever it is. Such kind of calculations are represented inside a rectangle. And the fourth one is rhombus. Rhombus is used to check, to make a decision. Let's say we have 2 variables A, B. You want to find the greatest, or you want to find greater than equal to B, less than or equal to B conditions. Such kind of conditional operators will be represented in rhombus in this way. Is A greater than B? Question mark. It's not equals, it is comparison, okay. This is equals and this is comparison. While comparison, use rhombus. And for rhombus, you will have 2 outputs. Either you will come like this if the condition is true, or you will go like this if the condition is false, okay. This is rhombus. And the next thing is small circle. I'll show why it is used. Small circle is used to connect different parts of a flowchart. Small circle is used to connect different parts of the flowchart. And the final one is arrows. Either it's like this, or it's like this, or it's like this, or it's like this. Arrow marks are used to represent the flow of the flowchart. So these are the multiple things. I'll restart. Either you go with oval for start or stop, go with parallelogram for input and output operations, go for rectangle to solve an equation, go for rhombus to make a decision, small circle to connect the different parts of the flowchart, and arrow marks to show the flow of the flowchart. Now let's do a simple example, okay. Let's draw a flowchart to find sum of 2 numbers. Simple lo తీసుకున్నాం, sum of two numbers. So see this diagram, see this sheet, and tell me how we start. Yes, we have to start with the start. Okay, what is the next operation? If we want to find the great sum of two numbers, we have to ask the user to input the two numbers, input a comma b. Is it clear? Next, we have to perform the addition kada in simple rectangle. C is equal to a plus b, right? Is it clear till now? And then what is the output? Where is the output stored? It's stored in the variable c. In simple again rhombus, output c and end. This is how you draw a flowchart. See this addition of two numbers ki in the flowchart. Okay, now let's draw one more. I want to find the greatest of two numbers. A is greater than b. For that, the solution goes start. Okay, input again same, a comma b. Now tell me, we are using a conditional operator. Is a greater than b? Should we use a rectangle? No, we won't use a rectangle here. We will use a rhombus like this. Is a greater than b? Question mark. There may be two possibilities. If I take a as 5, b as 3, this condition is true. What if a is 2 and b is 3? This condition is false. So two arrows. You come like this, you come like this. If it is true, if it is false. If it is true, output, my diagram just is like this, okay, it's extended. Output a is greater, or else come here, print p is greater, fine, and then pull them here. You have to end it, so circle end. You seeing this? You seeing the beauty of flowchart? This is how you draw a beautiful flowchart. Now I want you people, this is the assignment, okay, my class ends here. This is the assignment. I want you people to draw a flowchart to find the greatest of three numbers, a, b, c. You have to find the greatest of three numbers, and the solution for this I'll provide it in the next part of the video. Okay, part 2. In the next part we'll be starting with the introduction to C programming. That is the part 2 of your unit 1. So this officially completes part A of your unit 1. If you have the syllabus structure, go for it. This completes the part A of your C programming, okay, the first unit. So in the second video we'll be covering part B, and in the third video part C. So in the 3 videos, 1 unit will be done. You can come here again and again to study it. I'll put the timestamps in the description so that you can directly go to the part where you have the doubt. Okay, Jai Balaya.